welcome back to the Problem with Authority podcast. My name is Kirsten Kelly, your host, and today I have a special guest, Noni, who is a social worker who works in hospice care and end-of-life care, and she's going to talk with us all about today the impacts that COVID has had on older adults, and how we just need to be more proactive and just spread awareness about these issues so that we can do a better job all around. So do you want to go ahead and give us a little background and introduction?
Sure. So my name is Noni Ife Taylor. I am from and currently reside in Wilmington, Delaware. I earned my BSW from Westchester University and my MSW with a certificate in aging and health from Rutgers University. Currently, I am a full-time hospice social worker. And my passion, my niche is threefold. It's all about aging, mental health, and end-of-life care because all of it matters. And I'm happy to be here, so thank you for the opportunity.
Yes, of course. And end-of-life care has been such a subject that has been coming up for me a lot. I was talking about it the other night with another social worker, and then I had a project on it, on how older adults, end-of-life, and climate change are all connected, so it definitely needs to be something that needs to be discussed. So I'm really happy that you're here. So go ahead. Where do you want us to start? Where should we start when having this conversation?
So I definitely want to discuss how aging and COVID has been crazy. And we've seen with COVID how society views older adults. Everyone is afraid to get older for some reason. There's this perception that your life ends when you turn 65, and that's not necessarily the case. And some people have a worldview of older adults when they get older. So a lot of people associate them being unable to move independently, where that's not all older adults. That's just some. But definitely with COVID, it opened my eyes to how society places barriers and limitations on older adults. So last year when COVID first hit and all of the hospitals were running low on ventilators, I definitely saw a commentary from people suggesting that the younger get saved first versus someone who is older, because the older person lived his or her life. So don't save them first, save the younger person first, because that younger person has the opportunity to do what they dream to do or meet their goals. And it's, how can we view older adults as worthy and unworthy? You know, unworthy to receive full treatment because of their age, or unworthy because of their limitations. Who are you to say what they need? And another component is the vaccine. The vaccine is rolling out, and you see a lot of people having this commentary: should older adults get the vaccine? Do they deserve to get the vaccine? That worthy versus unworthy commentary again. Whereas, we should save the vaccines. For some reason, people think that giving older adults the vaccine, we're going to run low of the vaccine and it's not going to be enough. That's not true.
No.
That's not true.
Right.
And believe it or not, you have older adults who want the vaccine, who is calling themselves to check for the vaccine, to see where they can get it, how do they need to schedule, where do they need to go, and they're doing it on their own. And so I am just beside myself to recognize and see these things, and it just put things in perspective of how much social workers are needed to work with older adults on every level of practice. When it comes to policy, when it comes to direct practice, like what I do now, hospice care, but also advocating for older adults that they still have the right to be independent and make their choices if they are able to do so. And even when they're not, still providing a care to them to still make them feel like they are included and you see them. I think that's the core of it. When older adults get older, and for some who lose some of the things that make them connect to the world, like their hearing, their seeing, when those things are lost, it makes their world smaller to how they connect with the world. And so it's something that I'm really passionate about, because I do believe that older adults have so much wisdom and so much to contribute to society, regardless of their age. As a millennial, some of them already lived what I'm going through. So it's just an honor for me for their legacy, to speak up for them. Not saying that they can't, but to provide some education that getting older is not bad. Right. And the core of it all is that we are all aging. we don't start aging when we turn 65. The day we come out of our mother's womb, we begin to age. We develop. We go through changes, across the lifespan. And that's why it's so important for me to touch on areas such as aging, mental health, and end of life, because your living experience can impact all three. Yeah. So if you experience some type of traumatic experience, that's going to have an impact on how you live. It's going to have an impact on how you age. Stress, anxiety can make you physically sick. That can impact you at the end, literally at the end of life, because there may be unresolved trauma and issues that you need to resolve to bring closure, to feel okay to pass. And so it's just really important to kind of bring some normalcy around aging. Aging is not a death sentence. You're not, aging is a good thing. It can give you so much flexibility. And it's like with millennials now, when we turn 16, we have more freedom. Some of us get our driver's license. When we turn 21, we can drink. Party. Exactly. There's different incentives that come with getting older. As you get older, a lot of things that you worried about 5 years ago really don't impact you now. You kind of just go with the flow and you live life on your own terms. So that's one of the things that I wanted to highlight with aging and COVID, but also with COVID, understanding the importance of end-of-life planning. This is something that I'm big on, and I've been talking about before COVID, but now I feel, my personal opinion is that you do not have an option. You do, but you don't, because our society talks so much about autonomy and having self-determination and being in control and making your own decisions. Well, if you don't have a plan in place, you forfeit all of that, and you put what you may want into somebody else's hands because you did not plan. So the power that this society promotes, that power can be forfeited if you don't have an end-of-life plan. And an end-of-life plan is not an older adult thing. It's a human thing. If you're an adult, wherever you are in that category, you should have a plan. And it's not just, I know death is such a taboo subject, and everyone doesn't talk about death at the dinner table. That's fine. But you need a what if plan. And an inner life plan doesn't necessarily have to be when you die. It can be, God forbid, if someone gets into a car accident and they can't think clearly. Who's going to advocate for you?
Mm-hmm.
Who's going to be your power of attorney? Those are the kind of things for social workers who are expecting to go into private practice and be a therapist, because that's a thing. Everybody wants to go into private practice.
Mm-hmm.
As a therapist, you need to have a plan of how you're going to serve your clients and how your clients is going to receive service if something happens to you.
Right.
What is the protocol? What is the process? How will your clients be notified? Will there be a continuous service? And who will provide that service?
Mm-hmm.
That's a plan. That's a what if plan. That's an end of life plan. It is something in place because advanced planning prevents crisis decision making.
Right.
That's with everything,
Mm-hmm.
not just with end of life, but when you plan ahead, you prevent a crisis from happening.
Right.
And being in crisis mode, to me, means you're going to make rash decisions that you probably would not make if you had a sound mind.
Mm-hmm.
So because you don't have a sound mind, you are going to desperate measures to meet a resolution. And that's not good. Mm-hmm. Now, of course, things happen, right? And that's not always ideal. But I truly believe while someone has the capacity to think, to speak for themselves, they should have an end of life plan.
Wow.
I do. Even in, end of life plan, everybody's end of life plan is different because everybody's journeys are different. But I think it is so important to at least do an advance directive of what do you want to happen? What measures do you want? If you are unable to speak for yourself, if you're unconscious, that kind of plan needs to be somewhere. And you need to appoint someone you trust to advocate for you. And making sure that the person you are electing gives consent. Yes, I can do this. Mm-hmm. Because sometimes people just say, oh, my best friend is going to do it. I'm going to choose my best friend. But you haven't had a conversation with your best friend about what you want. You didn't even ask your best friend if she or he has the capacity to fulfill that role. Right. Because it is a role that you have to fulfill. And I've seen a couple times in my work where someone has been a power of attorney and they're stressed. And they're asking me what they should do. I can't make that decision for you. You have to, based on the conversation that you had with your loved one, you have to make a decision based on what she or he wanted. Mm-hmm. Now, if that person didn't have the conversation with you, you kind of have to do what you think is best. So it's all about communication and comfort levels. I know, sometimes talking about end of life can be scary for people. Some people may think talking about it may bring it to existence. Right. But how I look at it, to reframe, we set goals.
Yeah.
We
prep for divorce, prenups. What could happen? Mm-hmm. Right.
Because that's advanced planning, right, to prevent X, Y, and Z. Right. It's just if you're saving for emergency savings, right, you plan for that. Mm-hmm. To prevent the crisis of if something happens to your car, it's not overwhelming. It's an inconvenience. It's an inconvenience because you had something saved to mm-hmm. take care of whatever. Whereas if you didn't have it saved, it's going to be overwhelming and you're going to be in crisis mode. And so you're likely to probably take out a loan, ask people to help you with X, Y, and Z that you know you probably cannot pay them back, and you're promising that you're going to pay them back. That's being in crisis decision making.
Right.
So it's a good thing to do, and the reason why is you lower the chance of conflict among your family or your friends or whoever you consider your family, because family could be anyone, doesn't have to be blood related.
Right.
But it lowers that because if you have something in place and you let the person know, listen, this is where everything is. It has all my wishes, what I want. God forbid, if that moment comes, whatever, that individual knows where your documents are and they can follow it.
Right.
And you give whatever, however it turns out, if the individual passed, you give your family the opportunity to grieve, not be stressed and angry and mad. Not mad because you're gone, mad because you didn't have a plan in place.
Right. So now the stress is on everybody involved.
Yes.
Right.
And you leave people to wonder what you want.
Right.
You may have someone who is so simple, they don't even want anything. But because they didn't have a plan in place, they had their daughter spending X amount of dollars on a massive funeral
right.
that the individual, if they made a plan, they probably would not have selected that or wanted that.
Right. This just fires off so many things in my head, what I've just been learning about end of life or end of life care over the past few weeks, and it just keeps coming up. So there's something about it that we need to be talking about, because you're right. You said in the beginning, like, our society wasn't made for end of life care. It's made for the young. And there's such stigma around aging, like you talked about. And I think that's why none of us think about it, because we don't want to think about it, because we're like, well, once we get older, like, we're just going to be tossed to the side. So it's like, why even worry about that? But a lot of us too, like, my parents are older than typical parents of kids or people who have kids that are like 22 and my sister's age. And so I worry about that. I'm like, you guys need to have a plan, because when this happens, I don't want to be stressed. And recently, my coworker, her mother-in-law passed away, and everybody has a different opinion about what needs to be going on, and they can't even grieve. And you, like, I can't even imagine working in hospice in this past year. Like, you frontline worker, like, literally props to you, because nobody planned for COVID. Wow. And then now you're saying, we never had an end of life. Like, people aren't even thinking about end of life care. And just the chaos that I can't even imagine that what you have been through in this past year working with families.
Yeah, it's been really challenging, because that's another component with aging and COVID, how older adults, well, let me backtrack. Brene Brown, who is like my social work hero, she said, and I believe this is so true, she said we are all wired for human connection.
Right.
And that is the honest truth. And older adults, they like to socialize. They crave skin hunger. They love a gentle touch on the hand, a hug. And COVID snatched that away from them. Oh my gosh, when we talk about nursing homes and when we're talking about social work on a macro level, a lot of our nursing homes were on the last of the totem pole to receive a lot of the resources and a lot of materials that they needed to help them thrive. And the cases were massive in nursing homes. So that right there gives you a great indication of how our system, how our society views older adults, and where they live and how they thrive. And so that was very difficult, because when COVID happened, the nursing home shut down. No one could visit. Family, nobody. So just imagine, for some older adults, who have dementia,
Right.
who have Alzheimer's. They're so confused because their caregiver is not showing up. There's people coming in with masks. They don't know who's who. And it increased isolation. It increased their depression because they're not connected. And yes, we implement all the alternatives like video calls, but that's not authentic.
No.
It's not the same,
Mm-hmm.
especially if you have some older adults with barriers such as seeing or hearing. It's not the same. It's really not the same. It's doable, but it's not the same. And for me as a hospice social worker, I love older adults. I would go to bat for them. That's just because when I think about older adults, I think about my grandmother,
right,
who is 65, but she's an LPN and she is thriving. She just brought a MacBook. She is the bomb.
right.
Okay, and I treat every older adult that I work with like I would treat my grandmother, how I would want my grandmother to be treated. And so it's been very hard for me because I love loving on my patients.
Mm-hmm.
I love it. I love giving them a hug. I love combing their hair. I love interacting with them.
Mm-hmm.
And having a mask on, having a face shield is such a barrier, especially if they're hard of hearing, and with the mask, you sound muffled a little
right.
bit.
Mm-hmm.
So it's been hard because now with the vaccines rolling out, it's been okay. So, a facility may say, okay, you guys can visit, but if someone gets exposed, they shutting back down. We can't get in.
Right.
So since I've started as a hospice social worker, I have not had the opportunity to meet a lot of my patients who live in nursing homes due to COVID. So, and it makes me sad because I try to engage and give their family a peace of mind. At least if I'm able to go into the nursing home, I can call their family and say, hey, I'm here with mom and dad. This is what's going on. But it's not like that. I'm trying to figure out what's going on just as much as their loved one is. And so it's just been very difficult. And it's still hospice. We're still dealing with end of life, but it is hard when someone who was admitted onto service contracts COVID, because it just takes a toll on them.
Mm-hmm.
And you know how that goes.
Right.
And it's hard. It's really hard. And I love hospice.
Mm-hmm.
I love being a hospice social worker. I don't see myself doing anything else.
Mm-hmm.
It's really ministry for me.
Mm-hmm.
And so to be able to connect with patients and families from all different walks of life is truly an honor and a privilege to be able to be with someone so intimate on that level. It's, as a social worker, you're going to experience end of life wherever you are.
Right.
So if you're working in a hospital, a patient may cold, they may not be able to bring them back. That's end of life.
Right.
Or
child welfare.
if one of your, so you're going to see it.
Mm-hmm.
But to actually be with someone who's been given a terminal prognosis and to be with them during that whole process, that's an honor, and I don't take it for granted. I saw a t-shirt on Amazon that says it had hospice social worker.
Yeah.
And it says, I work in God's waiting room. And that is the honest to God truth.
Right.
I really work in God's waiting room, and I'm just always honored every day to meet. Because for me, I don't see the person as whatever their diagnosis is.
Mm-hmm.
I'm seeing them as a person.
Mm-hmm.
So before you have this, whatever it is, whether it's cancer, COPD, whatever, you contributed to the world.
Right.
You did something. You're still doing something. You still bring your family joy. What is that? And I am entering their world. You know, when I go into their home, my biases, however I feel,
right.
whatever day I'm having, all that gets shut down because they didn't have to let me in, but they did. And the least I can do is be present with them and give them my undivided attention and give them what they need in the moment.
Right.
So I mean,
I want you to take care of. I want you to take care of me. And
I will. No problem.
I love how you speak with such passion. Like that's amazing that you've found, you know, really where you want to be, and you love working in this stage, which is such. It's a hard stage, and it's taboo to talk about and discuss. And it probably just brings a whole different perspective to just everyday life and living. And I heard you talk about how the conversation earlier was, should older adults get the vaccine? Should they get the ventilators first, or should the younger kids get it? Which I think, and how you said, like, the nursing homes were like the last people to get anything, which is so interesting because on the news, in a lot of sources, it seemed like they were top priority. So that's not really what was going on, is what I'm hearing. And
I mean, it's now in certain areas, maybe that is the case.
Right. Where are you at?
But
can you tell us where?
I'm in Delaware.
Okay.
But and this is just across the board, I find it very alarming, the rates of how many of our seniors were getting contracted with COVID in the nursing home.
Right.
So I don't know what all of the nursing homes protocol is and how they do things, but it makes me think whether they have enough supplies to, and then on top of that, you at that time, like, well, still, we don't even know. It's just a big question mark.
Right, exactly. We're all just kind of, right.
Social distance, just, you know what I mean? Because it's a big question mark. No one really knows.
Right. Even with the vaccine, like, people are saying it's probably, we're going to have a booster, like, 6 months. And I'm like, oh, so this isn't done. Great.
Yes. But what I can say is, older adults, they do want the vaccine.
Yeah.
So for people who think that they don't want it or they shouldn't get it, newsflash, they do want it and they are getting it. And they're signing up for it. My grandmother is one of them. She is fully vaccinated. Awesome. My grandfather is fully vaccinated. I have hospice patients who are fully vaccinated, older adults. So just because older adults are getting a vaccine, that does not mean we're running low of the vaccine. It will be enough for everyone. Wow.
I haven't heard, like, that confusion, like, people thought about that, but yeah, no, that's not how that works.
That's not how that works.
Right.
And it's just, our society is ageist.
Yeah.
And when you add other layers of race, COVID has been difficult for Black and brown people, Black and brown older adults. That's just the reality of it. We still have medical racism.
Oh, yeah.
We still have mistrust in the healthcare system. And, you know, even with COVID and also being a hospice social worker, it's been challenging because you're not just serving the patient. The family unit is your client as well. And so they need assistance with navigating services and resources. And it is so important for social workers who have the passion for it, not just doing it because it's good financially, but social workers really who are interested really should take the opportunity to get involved with older adults. And not so much, yes, with older adults, but in conjunction with that, they're caregivers. So many older adults, they want to stay home, but the barrier is, do the caregiver have the resources and the services to make sure they're honoring what they want?
Right.
And sometimes, no. Because financially, and also I find this to be a little alarming. So we are told so much about saving.
Right.
401k, X, Y, and Z. But when we need long-term Medicaid, sometimes you don't qualify because you make too much, or you're a little bit over, and it disqualifies you. And if someone needs caregiving in the home, paid caregivers, some of that is very costly.
Oh yeah.
So it's a system. We need social workers on every level to make living better,
right,
for older adults, and not leave them behind and not forget them, but actually see them. Everyone's wish is not to go into a nursing home, but sometimes there is no choice because living at home is not safe. Right. So, we really need better policy planning for our older adults because
and
they're living longer.
That's healthcare. Like, that's a part of it. That's a part of it. And it's like, oh, like, we struggle. We struggle there.
We have a long way to go.
Yeah.
We have a long way to go.
Right. And that's why these conversations are so important. So, like, the more that people talk about how it affects literally everybody, it's a human issue. And if you don't fit in this category, you might fit into it the next day or the day after that or a year later. Like, it's gonna affect you. And when I did my project, I was like, this is a human issue. Like, especially, like, if you're the sandwich generation, you're caring for your parents, you have kids, like, and childcare is expensive. Like, nobody can pay for anything, and it's not. We gotta work it out.
We do.
We gotta work it out.
And so that's one of my, especially as a millennial, I had a guest lecture opportunity with my alma mater, Westchester University, and one of my professors, she asked, "How is it, being this advocate for end of life, but you're a millennial, like, but we're talking about living life to the fullest and doing it, and I said, you know what, I see a need, and that's what social workers do. When they see a problem, they find a solution. And I realized this before COVID. So during my undergrad, when I was interning at hospice, I realized that there were a gap of service of African Americans utilizing the hospice benefit.
Right.
So I done research, what are the barriers, what are the implications, and I realized, with older adults, there's not a lot of social workers who want to work with older adults. There are a lot of misconceptions about working with older adults. There's just a lot of fear around getting older and dying. Yeah. But the core of it is that it's inevitable.
Right.
It's going to happen.
That's the worst part.
You cannot go around it. Right. It's not like you're driving down the street and you see an accident and a detour, and you're aging now.
Yep.
And you're going to die.
Yeah.
But the key is, for me, I believe you can live and you can die well. You can live well and you can die well. And I believe die well means you can have an end-of-life plan. You can.
Right.
And it is down to, and I'm so passionate about this, is the end-of-life plan. Putting the documents in place is just one aspect. But I'm passionate about, how do you want to be treated at the end?
Mm-hmm.
What matters to you? Does it matter that people speak to you? Because, you know, depending on, and we don't know where life is going to take you. So
Mm-hmm.
everyone may not be on hospice.
Right.
But if it comes to a situation where, whether you're on hospice or not, if you're unable to speak and if you're dying, hearing is the last sense that goes.
Mm-hmm.
So do you want people to speak to you?
Right.
What do you want in the room? Do you want essential oils? Do you want massages?
Right.
I'm into that.
Right.
Speak to me.
Right.
Tell me who's in the room. I don't want anybody quiet like a mouse, feel like they want to walk on eggshell. No. If
Right.
you're going to do that, you need to stay home.
Right.
Because I don't want that. Because I'm not dead yet.
Right.
I just can't respond. Treat me like I'm a person.
Mm-hmm.
Talk to me. Remind me of things that we did together.
Mm-hmm.
You know, be there.
Right.
So that's what I care about. But I believe, in order for people to get to that point,
Mm-hmm.
we're going to have a conversation about the barriers.
Oh yes, I was just about to bring it back to that. Awesome.
Yeah. What about death that scares you?
Mm-hmm.
What has been your experience? For example, my passion is for Black older adults
Mm-hmm.
to participate in end of life planning.
Mm-hmm.
But I have to be realistic and honest. Talking about good death, that's good and all, but for African Americans, death has not been good.
Mm-hmm.
It has always been traumatic.
Yeah.
Even today,
Yeah.
with what we're seeing on the news outlet. So how can I expect my people to visualize death being good and there's traumatic death all around them?
Mm.
So I think it's so important for me, and my mission is, it's a journey. We got to walk through this together.
Mm-hmm.
Let's unpack the concerns, the barriers, and then we can progress to the important stuff. But I do believe, though, however someone feels, you definitely need to have something in place if you're unable to make decisions on your own. Whether that's electing, a power of attorney, someone that is really close to you and you
Mm-hmm.
had the conversation. If your heart stops beating today or tomorrow, do you want CPR? And that's going to be different. That is a different conversation for different people.
Mm-hmm.
As a younger person, yes,
Mm-hmm.
I want you to do everything you can. Someone who's 60, 65, 70, even 80,
Right.
yes, save me.
Mm-hmm.
But then you go through things in life and that changes. So the great thing about, advanced planning is that it can be reviewed and changed.
Mm-hmm.
where you are in life. I feel like your end of life plan, you should do inventory, like an end of year review, how you review your goals, see what you accomplished for the year, see what progress you made. I certainly believe that should be the same thing for your end of life plan.
Mm-hmm.
Whether you started a business that's profitable, if you are an influencer on social media,
Mm-hmm.
that matters.
Mm-hmm.
Like, it matters so much that even Facebook has a component where you can elect someone to monitor your Facebook page when you die.
Wow.
Or you can have the option to just have it permanently deleted when you pass.
Right.
So obviously, if Facebook is giving you that option, clearly
it matters.
it's something to think about.
Right.
It matters.
Right.
Yes.
Right.
So for you can't. And this is the last part I'm going to say. You have to think about things from a holistic perspective. when you start a thing, you got to think about how it's going to end.
Right.
You're going to have a plan. And that's with anything.
Mm-hmm.
So, yes, for example, starting a business or starting an opportunity is great. It's amazing. But what if?
Right.
And it's not to say, like, make your whole existence be around what if, and
Mm-hmm.
you're so anxious because you're thinking about what if.
Right.
But it's all about legacy, right? You want to leave a legacy. And legacy is so much more than leaving stuff. Legacy can also be doing things in decency and order.
Right. And leaving peace to your family and loved ones.
Are you going to leave chaos?
Right.
Or are you going to leave comfort and peace?
Right. Oh, yeah.
Because you put things in place.
Mm-hmm.
Or are you going to have people going crazy
mm-hmm.
because they don't know where nothing is. They don't know what you want. Why? You do a disservice to yourself.
Mm-hmm.
If you're gonna, my thinking is, if you want to be in control, do it all the way.
Right. And our society has such a really bad habit of messing with things after it's happened. Like, prepping, prevention, or just helping along the way, we're not great at. But that, I never thought about that in the sense of, like, end-of-life care. But like you said, there are so many barriers, like, aside from financial, aside from stressful and anxiety. I know a lot of people are even just scared to even talk about death and dying.
Mm-hmm.
And then aside from, like, specifically what you're talking about, the African American community experiences, like the distrust, the like, I really don't even want to deal with that. Don't even want to go to that side of things. So these barriers are what we need to be addressing so that we can move forward and get our stuff together. And I was listening to, do you know that Netflix podcast that's like the Midnight Gospel? It's like a really like trippy like podcast, but I was listening to it and they were talking about how the history of funeral homes. And I thought it was really interesting. And I don't know, I didn't double check that, so don't quote me on it if it's not true. Mm-hmm. But they were talking about how when people would pass away, like way back in the day, there was no rush to get them cremated, spend millions of dollars on, because dying is expensive with funerals, and it's so expensive. And there wasn't a rush to that. It was just that they would, bury them how they would bury them, or whatever ceremonial thing that the family, felt fit. And then what happened was, capitalism, some guy was like, oh, like there was a war and there were so many bodies that were happening. They were like, oh, well, we should take this as an opportunity to force people to think that this is what you need to do, that you need to start putting people in these very expensive containers, I don't even know what, caskets, right? Mm-hmm. And then that's just kind of what became the norm. And I thought that was so interesting because I had just finished reading the book The Immortal Life of Henrietta Lacks, and when she passed away, the family had her in front of the house on steps because the air was so cool where they were in Virginia that it's still, like, the body doesn't instantly, like, start decaying. Like, it takes a little while, right? And so the family could pay their respects while she was laying there, and it was just like, everybody's allowed to grieve, everybody's allowed to just go through the emotions of it. There's not this hoopla of flowers and expensive, and everybody's freaking out, and so much conflicts going on within the family. So I just thought that was so interesting. Like, why, how did we get here? Like, why is it taboo to think about death and die? Where did the expense come from? Where did the barriers come from?
And I know for in the Black community, our funerals is like, it's a ritual. It's not a ritual, but the way we do things is it's considered a home-going service. Right. It's a celebration of life.
Right.
And that's what we do. Mm-hmm. So you will see, if you go to a Black funeral, you will see large floral arrangements that are beautiful. After the funeral, we have something called repast, where there's really good food. And I'm just being honest.
Right.
But it's a way for us to connect. And also, when we talk about end of life and spirituality, it is a way of celebrating our loved one going home to God.
Exactly.
So despite the circumstances of how the person died, the fact of the matter is they're going back home,
right,
with God, and we're going to celebrate that. And so that's been a cultural thing for years,
right?
And Black funeral directors, they tailored in that area for us because that's just what we do. But you bring up a good point about funerals are expensive.
Yeah.
Funerals are really expensive, and as a hospice social worker, that's one of the things I love. So of course I don't say, oh yeah, you should definitely do this and that.
Right.
But sometimes it can be really overwhelming for the family to call funeral homes. So I will call the funeral home and ask about certain things based on what they're looking for, and then I just compile a list of what they're looking for and say, hey, these are the funeral homes that have what you're looking for. Give them a call and they can talk. But that's one of my favorite parts because I ask about everything.
Right. And it's what they want. And there's no one proper way to... It's what you... And then if we plan for it, we have a say in what happens. So, right.
And your funeral doesn't have to be expensive
if
you plan, because you have some people who are simple and they're like, and who are frugal with their finances.
Right.
So they're like, you know what? Just cremate me.
Right.
If that's the cheapest way.
Right. Right. Or take that money and everybody go on a family trip together.
Yes.
And talk about me.
Yes. And believe it or not, I have had patients who wanted that.
Right.
They're like, don't spend a lot of money on a funeral. Get me cremated. The money that you get a new car, go on vacation, spread my ashes across the water. And this is the thing. When we get to a place, if we ever get to a place, and we're able to talk about death the way we are right now,
right,
we can really think about what we want. So we're not in a crisis about just picking the most expensive casket. You know what I mean?
Right.
It's actually, it can be a little morbid. I like talking about death and dying and everything about death. But there are options. There are a lot of cool options to how you want to be buried. That doesn't necessarily have to be expensive.
Right.
If you're someone who is into nature and saving the planet, there's options.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Oh, cool. Okay.
There's different options to meet your needs. But you have to look into those things before, you know what I mean? Just to get an idea. But some people, they just don't want to get into that. And the bottom line is whether someone plans or not, I have to meet them where they're at.
Yeah. And like
even as a hospice social worker,
that turns into family therapy really quick.
They know they're dying.
Yeah.
They know that it's coming soon.
Right.
And they still do not have a plan. You know what? Even when they're in a crisis, I have to show up.
Right.
And help them through the crisis.
Yeah.
And even though my anxiety is at 100 and theirs is on 300,
right,
it's okay. At the end of the day, the goal is to get it down. The goal is to at least have them identify a funeral home to come pick up the body. Once they have identified a funeral home, we have accomplished a goal.
Right.
Now, with them doing the funeral planning and that's outside of me, but that part, that's crisis because no one wanted to talk about it. No one wanted to put a plan. And even though I'm passionate about this work, And I probably, even when I become an older adult, I probably will still be talking about end of life planning and how it's so important and how you need to treat older. I would probably still be talking about this. But at the end of the day, I operate on empathy and meeting people where they're at.
Yeah.
So,
right.
You know, I will empathize with you. I will engage with you. I will encourage you. You know, I will empower you. I will educate you. Wherever you fall on that, I gotta meet you where you are, and we're going to have to work it out. And sometimes, with all the information that's out there and all the information that's given, someone has the right to choose to not do it.
That's the best part of life. We have the right to make our choices, and that could be fun for you, for others involved sometimes.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness.
Yes.
But I did want to ask you, because as you know, being on the front line, people out there, they know what needs to happen at the bigger levels, you know, to get things done and help things get better. So is there a specific like policy or law or anything that like you advocate for that could help this process, or that you feel like should be put in place? So like for any of my advocates or, you know, macro people listening, that they can take.
So one resource, and your listeners will have to just see if it's accepted in their state. It's called 5 Wishes.
Okay.
5 Wishes, I love it because it's kind of like an advanced directive. So it's broken down to 5 areas for the individual to fill out of what they want, even who they want to identify as someone to speak on their behalf. Matter of fact, let me look so I can tell you in detail, because that would be helpful. Because I want everyone to know what I honestly will use this, because it's really self-explanatory, and it doesn't get into it's not hard to understand. So the first wish in the booklet, it talks about who do you want to speak for, pretty much who you want to speak on your behalf. The second one goes into like medical treatment, what you want or don't want.
Right.
Then it's wish 3 talks about how comfortable you want to be, and wish 4, what we were talking about earlier, is how you want people to treat you. Like, what do you want? You want massages, you want essential oils, you want people to talk to you, you want them to bring flowers, you want them to play music. What do you want? And the last part, and I think it's so powerful, and it allows people to get thinking. The last wish is what you want your loved ones to know. So that can be a wide range of things. But I really like it, and you can go on to 5wishes.org, and they have trainings. You can order it for yourself. You can order it for your family.
Is it like the accessibility to it? Is it better than most?
I think so.
Okay.
But they will just have to check with their state to see if it's something that they accept.
Right, exactly.
Yep. And another resource is out of New Jersey, but it's still amazing. It's called the goalsofcare.org. I went to a symposium when I was in grad school, and it was amazing. So it really has information of how to start end-of-life conversations. Whether you're a professional, and because believe it or not, just because you work in a hospital does not necessarily mean you're comfortable with talking about end-of-life.
No.
Or starting end-of-life conversations.
Or being around it.
Yes. And sometimes people don't know what to say or how to start the conversation. So goalsofcare.org is out of New Jersey, but they have amazing resources out there for you to utilize. So those are the two. And I have one more, but I forgot the name, so I'll just send you an email so that way you can.
Perfect. I can put it in the caption for.
Absolutely.
Were you able to take in your master's the death and dying? Did they offer a death and dying course?
You know what? One of my goals, it's a big goal. Well, one of my goals is to advocate to have a end of life course in social work programs. Now, I did take a loss across the lifespan course, but it really didn't get into the meat and potatoes of death and dying. And that, I believe, that is what we need. We need some electives on aging, and we need some courses on death and dying, end of life, how to navigate that conversation.
Right.
Because even if your goal is not to be a hospice social worker, whatever sector you work in, you're going to have to know how to navigate end of life conversations, even in your own family, even in your own life. So I did take the loss across the lifespan. It was a really good class, but I honestly wanted something that specifically talks about death and dying,
right,
and how to provide a better service for people on hospice or people who have cancer, you know what I mean, things of that nature. So
right, because I don't know why I called it death and dying, because that's what first came into the head. But the one that we have was loss and bereavement. But I think it might have.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah, I think it used to be called death and dying, which is where I got that from. But I wasn't able to take it because when you're advanced standing, like, your semesters are so small, so you have to be very picky with what you choose. And I don't like that at all, because I think we should just be given the opportunity to just get all the information we need. Like you're saying, like, I could be working with an older adult in therapy, like, or even just a kid whose their grandfather just passed away. Like, that's a part of the conversation.
Now, you may have, and I don't know how true this is, but you may have some schools that specialize in a certain area, and so they may offer a death and dying course because that's what they have, a specialty in that area. So I know with me, I'm getting the certificate in aging and health. There were certain classes that I had to take to fulfill my certificate.
Right.
So one of them was loss across the lifespan. The other one was something with older adults. I forgot. Therapy for older adults or something like that. But there were classes that I had to take to fulfill that. So you may have some programs where you may be able to get like a certificate in bereavement, but in order to meet those requirements, you may have to take a course, like a death and dying course or something like that. But bottom line, I believe that whether a program offers a certificate for aging and health or bereavement, we should have a course specifically for older adults. Now, I know with your human behavior and social environment classes, I know for HIPSI 2, towards the end, it was like older adults and loss and all that stuff. But no, there needs to be a full course, of older adults, just to kind of break the barrier of this fear and ill. That's how I can describe it, ill. Because when you hear people describe older adults, it's very like disgust or like not favorable in a way. And we need to break that, because bottom line, you're going to work with an older adult. If you're in the school system, more than likely a grandparent is fulfilling the role as a guardian.
Exactly.
So you will have to take into consideration their barriers that they are experienced about caregiving for the second time, but also navigating the barriers that they may experience in helping them with services and resources. That, I mean, you're going to work you're going to come in contact with an older adult.
Right. And you might be one one day. So
You're aging.
Right.
Like, you're going to get older.
Right.
I just don't understand it. And that's the part that blows my mind, because it's confusing. Like, you don't want to work with older adults, but you're getting older. You're going to get old.
No,
like, I'm just trying
nobody believes it.
trying to figure it. And even now, like, my little cousin, he's 12, and he asked me how old I was. I told him 27, and he's like, "Oh my gosh, you're really old." I'm like, "What? I'm in my 20s." But he thinks I'm old. Like,
right.
certain stuff that he does is just what young people do. That's what he says. And I'm a millennial. So it's like, you're always going to have those dynamics with generations.
Right.
But the powerful thing is, all generations can connect. Millennials can connect with the older generation, and the older generation can connect with the younger generation, because we need each other for something.
Mm-hmm.
We need older adults for their wisdom.
Mm-hmm.
And then we can be a benefit to older adults to navigate the newness of this world,
right.
because it's always evolving,
mm-hmm.
you know, with technology and just all different type of things. So that's where we can be helpful.
Right.
And I know with social workers, young social workers, the concern is the power dynamic. How can I help an older person that's like older to be my grandmother?
Right.
What can I really say to an older person? And those feelings are valid. They're real. And those were one of my concerns as well. But I have to remind, I had an older daughter. She said, "How can you help me? I'm older than you. I'm older to be your grandmother. I can counsel you." That's what she said to me. And I said, "You know what? I don't doubt that you can. But the reality is, your experiences are not mine. And I'm not here to alter your world.
Mm-hmm.
I'm just here to understand it. I have the skills to help you break some things down, and we can work together. But I'm not trying to micromanage your experience. You have wisdom. And there are some things that you went through that you can probably teach me about. I'm not doubting that.
Oh, yeah.
But while you're here, there is something that you need that I believe I'm skilled enough to help you with."
Right.
And at the end of the day, you give them a choice. There are some older adults who prefer to work with someone around their age group.
Mm-hmm.
And that's perfectly fine.
Right. Because it's the same for us. Like, we might want somebody that's more our age if we have to work in, you know, whatever, therapy, teaching, you know, supervision, whatever.
And that's perfectly fine.
Right.
And then you have others that they really like that the younger person are bringing a new idea, fresh idea, and a new perspective.
Right.
And so it works. So, don't give up on older adults.
Right.
They're really cool.
And they've been through it. Like, they have seen a lot.
Mm-hmm.
Especially now, like, that in... Right. Like, there's been a lot. And, well...
Yeah.
It's insane. Especially reading about history and things. Like, it's...
Yeah. And I also want, like, millennials to know, or younger generation to know, is that your life experiences are valuable, too.
Right.
Because although they had their time, their experiences, we also have our times and our experiences that they have not seen before.
Mm-hmm.
So, prime example, our economy is just different.
Mm-hmm.
You know, our grandparents, they could go to college for a low cost.
Yes.
And not have to worry about student loans.
Right.
We're in an area where we really have to decide if we want to start a family.
Right.
Because of our student loans.
Yes, and
that is something that we have to choose.
Right.
Where our grandparents, they didn't have to worry about that.
Right.
But for us, because where we are, we have to make a decision. Do we want to survive?
Or do we want...
Or do we want to...
Or even with, like, I know one thing for me is, like, moving back home after I graduate to get on my feet. And the older adults are like, what are you doing? Like, are you being lazy? And I'm like, no. This is where we're at. This is the world, and we have to prep more, I feel like, for starting than a lot of people did before. Like, there's big decisions to make, and a lot of us are really thoroughly thinking through those decisions too, because we do have the privilege of, like, having those options, you know what I mean? Because there's a lot of stigma around different decisions and options that aren't there anymore.
Absolutely.
So it's just a whole new world, and
it's a learning experience,
right,
for both generations,
right,
and that's why we have to find a median to connect with each other,
right,
because we need each other. I believe we need each other. I need my grandma because she teaches me things, and I teach her things, and yes, God bless her, she has her own ideas,
right.
And she's firm in her ideas,
right.
and I say, you know what, you have the right to do so, but I give her a different perspective,
right,
and she trusts me, and that's the core, trust. Older adults know when you're being authentic, and when you're just trying to rush them off.
Right.
That's with any relationship. Authentic relationship and rapport is so important. So one day at a time.
Right.
Hopefully before I leave this world, I will be able to see the fruit of my labor.
Right. Oh, I mean, you're so passionate about this. I think you will, and it's so funny you say that your grandma's 65. Like, that's how old my dad is. Which is,
and I consider that young,
right? Like, it's not like I see him walking around, and I'm like, dang, 65's not bad.
Like, I consider that. So that's considered young old.
Right.
So there's different areas. You have your young old, you have your middle old, and you have your old old. So I consider that to be young.
Right.
Even like 75, I think I see that as young, and maybe old to others, but. My grandmother, I let her have her independence.
Right.
And I let her make her choices. So when she brought her MacBook and she brought the laptop MacBook, I said, okay. And you want me to help you navigate both? Okay.
Right.
It's just, and I promote healthy aging. That's one of my passions. We have to stop limiting older adults. Whatever we want to do, they should be able to do it as well if they can. So that's just another conversation. We may have to do a part two.
That's a whole thing. That goes into accessibility. That goes into aging sustainably. Yes. And
So,
right.
It's just like I promote healthy aging.
Right.
And one of my pet peeves, I know we're going to wrap up soon, but one of my pet peeves, pre-COVID, I don't know if they do it now, but the 100 days of school, when parents dress their kids up when it's been their 100th day. So sometimes they'll dress their kids up as older adults. And I despise it.
Right.
Because sometimes parents will dress their kids up as older adults with canes,
right,
with oxygen,
stereotype, right.
Okay? What is the message? What are you showing your kids? Like, this is the standard when you get old? No. So we have to do things a little differently, but we have to promote healthy aging. Someone's age should not be a barrier to how they live. If they have the capacity to do it, you should let them. And it's none of your business to how older adults live their lives. As long as they're safe,
right?
They're they are able to make their decisions,
right?
They're able to live. Let them do them. You know what I mean? There's no need to be scared
right.
of what. They have needs, they have wants, and just because they get older, their desires don't diminish because they're older.
Right.
You know what I mean?
And everybody, right, the generation too, the 65, like they have the Social Security still, which I don't know if we're gonna have. So they're just now like living their life. They're spending their money. Like nobody's gonna stop me when I'm that age.
Yeah, but even when to bring up another point, even where we are today has also impacted our older adults pertaining to retirement.
Mm-hmm.
You know, some of them, they don't want to retire early because they're not going to receive the full benefits. So some they have to go all the way just to get a decent money back.
Right.
Or you have some that retire and go work somewhere else,
right,
just to live. So there's some parallels there. So while as younger people we have to make some hard decisions, older adults who are close to retirement, they have to make some decisions as well.
Right.
There's the parallel. We can relate to each other more ways than we know. But people just have to want to explore.
Right.
That's all.
Right.
So.
Oh my goodness. Well, thank you so much for having this conversation.
You're welcome. We have to do a part 2.
I'm so down to do a part 2.